Oh, hello, welcome. I hope you can hear me. My name is Andrés Caicedo. I'm an editor at Math Reviews. And I am going to be giving a few pointers, especially directed to people in early stages of their career. I hope you find some of this information useful. Let me try to share the screen. Okay, I hope you can all see the interface for MathSciNet. If you have questions, I think the best way to proceed is for you to type them on the chat. There is a feature where you can submit a question different from this, and unfortunately, I don't see a way to reply to those. So I suggest that you use the chat interface instead. Okay, so MathSciNet. When I was starting as an undergrad, Math Reviews was actually published in paper. And that's how I learned about it. The math departments used to have well, walls covered in the different volumes of Math Reviews. And you needed a little bit of training to know how to navigate those volumes. But it was a useful thing. Our primary goal was to index the mathematical literature, providing reviews for most of it, some of it. I think that now that we are fully online as a database, there are a lot of other features that are very useful as well. So let me point out to a few things. Definitely the fact that we have the reviews is something that lots of us find very useful. Each review comes with an MR number, which is an identifier. It allows us to find a review just by typing that number in the search. And typically, we provide some information about the item at hand, in this case, the name of the author, the affiliation, the title of what we're reviewing, and some additional bibliographical information, together with the classes of the MSc classification system that we use to classify this item for the purpose of identifying appropriate reviewers for it. I chose this specific example because at the end you can see an addendum. So that's one feature that being online allows us to do, which is if we, for some reason, feel that we need to update a review, you can see the updated version when you look for it directly, as opposed to maybe the updated version being elsewhere, which would be the case if this were still a publication in print. If you're interested in the original version, there is also a link, so all that information is preserved. So yes, so that was the way that I started using Math Reviews, specifically looking for specific items, and that was it. And that already is a very useful feature. But I think there is lots of other things that might help people for other purposes, and sometimes it's a bit unexpected. So let me show you some of those. For instance, you might be interested in the partition calculus, and you know that Erdős wrote a paper with that name. You don't know exactly the title. Our search allows you to find the different papers written by someone with the name Erdős that happen to have those words in the title. And that way you can identify the one you were looking for. You see not just the information related to the paper itself, which is what we briefly described before, but also on the side, you see the papers, a list of papers that have cited this one. Why is this useful? Well, because, for instance, if you are just getting interested in a topic, you might want to know, after finding a paper in it, what has been built after that. So that if you want to start researching in the area, you have an idea of what the latest developments are. And that might be hard to do at the beginning when one is not already an expert. So at least seeing the papers that grew out of something allows you to get a decent idea of this kind of thing. Let's look for a more recent example. This is a paper from 1972. If we look for a recent paper, you will see that the paper not just lists the authors, our information here not just lists the authors of the paper, but also lists their affiliations. Why is this useful? Why do we care about having access to the institutions of the authors of different papers? Well, there are different reasons. For instance, you might be in the process of applying to a position in one of these departments, and you are interested in seeing what kind of research is going on there. Of course, that's something that you can do by going to the university's page and browsing through the authors there. But that might be a bit daunting. If you look here, you're going to find the papers that have come out from people working at the specific institution. And that might give you a better idea of what's going on. For instance, if you're interested in number theory, then just by refining the original list that is provided to you, you get a good sample of the papers that people from that institution have produced. And by browsing through them, you get a good idea of what kind of topics are being researched there, which I think is a faster and probably more accurate way of knowing what's going on at the place than trying to navigate through the department's page, where there might be lots of different authors and it might be hard to keep track of these different topics. So that's something that I find useful. Of course, in this case, I kind of knew how to get here. One thing that you should be aware of is that if you don't know exactly the name of the institution you're looking for, there might be some ambiguity. For instance, just looking for University of California produces a large number of matches. And so it might be hard to actually find the papers from the institution you are specifically trying to reach. So there is a list here that allows you to find precisely what you're looking for. You see that we identify, when possible, not just the university, but the department the person writing the paper is affiliated to. This person works in the mechanical engineering department. This person does so in the electrical engineering department. So in case you're interested in somewhat more applied areas or in computer science or in math adjacent areas, Having this information might be useful when trying to decide about a university that you are going to apply to or are going to give a talk at or things of that nature. I think it's a useful information to have. The institution, let's see this back, is assigned a code. And if you just look for this specific code, then you just get papers that have authors from specifically the department that was selected in the search. Anyway, so that's some basic information. If you are applying or you need some information about the university, this is a way in which the resources that we have in the database may be useful to you. Other thing that might come in handy when you are starting is you need to decide where to submit your papers. And particularly when you are just beginning as a mathematician, you might not be aware of everything that is available to you. I know in particular when I was a student, I knew a few journals that were specific in my area. And I knew a few other journals that, of course, everybody knows about. But there are so many others, and I wasn't aware of them. And so whenever I had a paper, it was sometimes a bit of a process to figure out where to submit it. And that process can be made much easier just by selecting a journal here and looking for that. So let's say that you're interested in number theory. So you're going to look for papers in MSc classification 11, which corresponds to number theory. Our search allows you to see the journals that publish in that area. And then you can select for the journals and see what kind of things they publish that is specifically targeted to what you're interested in. It might be that some journals only specialize in certain topics. And so if you're interested in some others, then that probably tells you, okay, this is a good journal, but might not be the one best suited to you. As an extreme example, you can see Invenciones. It is an excellent journal. We provide a profile page for each journal in which you get some information. Some of the information might take you to the actual site of the journal. Some of it gives you, well, some data, how many papers we have listed in the database, the recent issues that we have provided, that we have published, if the paper is in our list of reference list journals. And you can find the MCQ of the journal, which is a way of checking the citations that the journal is getting, which might be something useful to know when you are deciding where to submit. This is a tricky thing, but some universities, when deciding things like tenure or promotion, check the journals where you publish. And so this is something that you might have to keep in mind every now and then. Anyway, so Invenciones certainly has a very large citation index. So it's a very good journal to try to publish in, but they don't publish in all areas. So if you're interested in, say, numerical analysis, then you'll find that this is really not one of the areas that gets published in this paper, in this journal. So of course you could publish there, you could try to publish there if you feel that the paper that you have written, well, is of the appropriate quality. But that might not help you, in the sense that your intended audience might not be aware that this is a journal they need to look at to see what's going on in their area. And if you're just beginning in your career, then that might actually not be the best strategy for you. When you are starting, you might want to try to network with other people. You might want to have them become aware of what you're doing. And if you publish in journals that are going to be invisible for them, then they are not going to find out about you. So it's a thing to keep in mind. This information might give you an idea of whether the journal you are targeting is appropriate for your interests at the moment or not. Let's go back to the example of errors. We provide a page for each author that we have in the database. The page has some basic information. It consists of things like the collaborators. If the person has a website, then that. The author ID that we use to internally identify the person, and some statistics like how many papers they publish, how many citations they have, different names under which an author has published, which might be useful. For instance, sometimes you change your name when you get married, but you still want people to know that you're the same person. So our author page tries to pair up appropriately the name you went by before with the current one, so that people see all your papers in the same place. We try to find as many matches as possible. We try to be very accurate, and this is one of the very useful features that we have. I find it really useful because sometimes it's hard to know which author you are looking for. Just knowing that airdrop wrote something doesn't tell you much when there are many airdrops. Just knowing that all airdrops wrote something might not be ideal because there might be several Paul airdrops. So we identify them somehow so that we can look at and see which one is the one that we were considering. And sometimes we find problems. We find that we have assigned to an author a paper from someone with the same name. As soon as we identify that, we separate the items, we separate the author profiles, so that this is very accurate. If you in particular find that you have been attributed papers from someone with the same name as you, but not by you, please let us know. It's something that we try to do, but sometimes we miss a few cases, and we'll fix the issue as soon as it's identified. So, okay, you are writing a paper and you want to cite this paper in your list of references. You're using LaTeX, and you want to know, well, how to input this item into your list of references. Probably the easiest thing, unless you are using some interface that provides you automatically with that information, is once you are in the page for the item in question, instead of looking at the review, you can actually request directly the BibTeX information that will be added that you can then directly copy and add to your bib file. This saves a lot of time. When I was starting, a lot of people had very ad hoc ways of creating their lists of references. And so I saw things like people trying to reverse engineer what kind of information was there and try to type it by hand or awful things of that kind. So we save you a lot of work here. You get the information ready to go and you can just add it to your list. In fact, let's go back. We provide you with a handy clipboard in which you can save this citation. So if you are writing your list of references, you are probably going to be looking at several papers. And all of them will have to go in your bibliography. You can save all of them in your clipboard. And once you're ready, once you have here the papers that you want, then you can automatically get, let's try again. You can automatically get the list for all of them. So a very handy thing. At the end, you just copy and paste into your bib file and you have the references ready to go. That's one of the features that I use the most. Another feature that is handy is, of course, studying the citations, as I mentioned. So let's look at that a bit more carefully now. Sometimes you're interested not just in a paper, but also in what work has come out of it. That's what this citation list shows you here. As you can see, when you have a list of various papers, among the information that we describe here, we handily list how many citations it has. And if you click on it, then you directly get to that list. So we're trying to provide several ways to navigate this information that might make things a bit easier for you to find. We provide both references that come from the bibliography of other papers, the papers that are in our reference list collection of journals. You find that we include their bibliography at the end of our reviews. And so there you can find the paper that we were looking at before. When you are selecting a journal for where to submit your paper at, that might be a useful bit of information to have, whether the paper is in our list of references, reference lists. To find that out, there is some information we provide in here, this bar with the heading of free tools. Among the things that you see here as options, one that is perhaps a bit counterintuitive is this that is marked as librarians. This link actually provides lots of really useful information to have, and I recommend that if you have some time, you actually go through it because there is all sorts of interesting things to use. There is a list of the journals that we are currently covering. there is a list of journals by publisher, and we have the list of reference list journals. So clicking on the list gives you quick access to some of the journals in that category. Again, those are the journals that when we add an item to the database, not only we provide, let's see, not only we provide the review, but we also provide the list of references. This is something that comes handy with lots of new papers. You probably can access them through the archive or through the author's page or things like that. But authors move, change affiliation. Sometimes web pages become obsolete, are not maintained. The fact that we have this information here is a way of being able to access it at any given point. We provide other information with the same effect. For instance, when we list an item, we provide links to the journal where the item was published. And if there is a version available online, then to the article itself. That takes you to the actual page for the article in the website for the journal. Whether you can actually access the article once you are there, of course, depends on what subscriptions your library has. But this gives you a quick way to get there from within our database. Another interesting thing that you can find here is when you look at an author's profile, you get a link to the Math Genealogy project database. This is an external site that gives you information about the author, in particular, who their advisor was, what their thesis was, and if they have students, well, who those students are, when they graduated, and from which institution. And here we return. So that might be useful too, to get a quick idea, for instance, of whether when you're choosing an advisor, whether this is a person that has a good record of students, or whether they are very picky in selecting students, and so might not be what you are interested in at the moment. This sort of thing might be really useful to know when you are selecting a mentor, maybe not for graduate school, but as a postdoc. This might be information that is useful to know. You get an idea of whether someone might have the time to actually serve as a mentor to you, or if you'll be navigating mostly on your own. Some people prefer one way, some people prefer the other, but it's good to be aware of both options. Our list of authors also provides a few other informations. The list of co-authors, as I had mentioned, a little thing which is kind of silly but might be useful sometimes, which is try to find a path between different authors. The kind of thing that we play with Kevin Bacon, mathematicians play with Paul Erdős. We can find a way of getting from one author to Paul Erdős this way. So it's a useful thing to have if you have a few moments and are bored. It's kind of fun. Anyway, so yes, so our free tools give you a way to find information about journals that might not be evident just from the basic interface that we have. We include different ways of navigating the site. You can select the way that you want the information to be displayed. I've been, for instance, selecting the information to appear as HTML display using MathJax, but if you want to save this information or print it, it might be more useful to have it as a PDF that you can then just print or save or work with as you wish. Sometimes papers are cited not just in other papers, but actually in reviews. So that might be something that is useful to see. Sometimes there is a corrigendum to a paper. So there will be a link from that corrigendum to the original paper. Sometimes a review mentions a paper, even if the list of references does not include it. So that might be additional information that the reviewer of the item provided and might be useful for you. So it's good to have in mind those two things. Just the citations coming directly from other papers and the citations coming from reviews. Okay, so I think that we might have some questions, so I'm wondering if we should look at some of them at the moment, and we can continue and provide some additional information after addressing some of this. Well, I think that most of this came from Ed itself. Okay.
Well, I was trying to fill in things before questions arose, so maybe that was not useful.
No, it's fine. Okay. All right, so let's get back to this. You see, we classify things. We include information not just from journals, but also for books. Books are certainly a bit different in that we tend not to include their bibliography. We have links to the book website when available. If they are part of a series, we try to provide a link to it if it is available. And
Andrés,
yes,
you're not sharing your screen right now.
Oh, that's great. Sorry. So let's go back to this. My apologies. So let's get back to this. So yes, I was saying in the basic search page that we have in our basic interface, we can also just look for a specific kind of publication, not just for journals, but can be things that are books. And we can look for books in a specific area. In this case, books in combinatorics. If you see one thing that is different when we provide a review of a book is that books do not come in our database with the list of references that they included in their bibliography. So that's something that might be a bit different. Even if a book cites your work, that won't be included in our count of citations. Anyway, when available, we try to provide you with links to the page for the book itself or for the series in which the book was published. And we try to provide some basic information about it as well that allows you to search for more items in that series in which the book was published, or to look for those books directly in the publisher's website. And one thing that I have been doing for a bit now is I've mentioned, for instance, okay, this is a book in combinatorics. And when I was looking for it, the information that I input was just the 2-digit class corresponding to combinatorics in our database. And well, I kind of remember what some of these codes are, but most likely when you are doing your work, you are not going to care about what these numbers are. You don't need to memorize that. Our free tools provide you with a way of finding that classification very handily. It's useful to include when you are submitting it to a journal, so it might help the editors of the journal to know how to look for reviewers, for referees for your paper. It's very useful to include this classification for us. It helps us find appropriate reviewers for your work. The latest version of the classification was just revised. It started in the year 2020, and in 2030 we'll have a new revision. This list gives you the topics, the way that we currently classify them. It gives you the classes that you might need, and it is useful to take a look at them when you are getting ready to submit, to include this information to help us in this regard. I know some authors find this bit annoying. They find that this classification is not perfect. So whenever we revise it, we invite people from the community to give us feedback. So please keep that in mind for the next revision. If you find that some features could be improved, that some classes probably need to be further refined, let us know, because you are the ones producing the work, you're the ones that are aware of what new areas have appeared that might not fit perfectly with the scheme that we have at the moment. So that might be very useful for us, which in the long run, we hope is helpful for you. So keep that in mind. Again, if you need to input the classification, the fastest way to reach it is going into our free tools tab and then selecting the math subject class that you want. You can either search for it directly by name, or if you already know what the class is, you just input the 2 digits, and that opens up a page with the 5-digit classes for that specific area that you were considering. This is a search that not a lot of people do, but it's a thing that might be useful to know as well. If you select a 5-digit code, you can also look for papers that directly use that code. So that's another way of finding papers in a topic that you are specifically interested in and might give you some information about things that you have missed, that you were not aware of from your previous searches of the literature. So it might be useful to keep in mind. What other things, well, you can have MathSciNet do for you? Well, some people find it useful to be reviewers for us, and I think that we appreciate it greatly, very much. If you're considering doing that, please give it a try. I think that a lot of people that are reviewers find it very rewarding in that you get access to papers that you are interested in, but sometimes you might not have been aware of or might not have taken the time to study. So this is a way of finding stuff that you might like. How do you apply to be a reviewer? Well, the simplest thing will be to contact us and say you're interested in it. Sometimes we send automatic invitations. If we are looking at a paper, we're adding it to the database, and we notice an author that is not in our records as a reviewer, and we find might be a person that might help us in this regard, we send them an automatic invitation. You just have to reply with some basic information, and then you're included in the database. When I was beginning, I got the chance to write a few reviews myself, and it's something that I found really useful. In what sense? Well, I got to study papers that I found interesting, papers that helped me expand the topics that I was considering. Sometimes these are papers adjacent to topics I had investigated. Sometimes reading these papers gives you new information that you weren't aware of, and you might just incorporate it directly in your research. I think it was really a good experience, and I hope that it's something that you also help us with. I think when you're a reviewer, you might just either give a very brief description of the paper that is given to you or try to provide some context. I particularly like those reviews that provide some additional context because they help other future researchers learn about the stuff that otherwise might be harder because there are no surveys of it in the literature yet. And sometimes you provide a little glimpse of history that might be good to know when you are considering an area to investigate. Anyway, so if you have questions, I think that now will be a good time for me to pause and let you think about it. And if you have, just include them in the chat and I'll try to answer them as best as we can. I mentioned that sometimes we identify mistakes in a review or we find new information that should be added. And when that happens, we revise previous reviews that we have. That happens constantly. If you find a review with a mistake, please let us know. The chances are much higher that you using the database will identify these issues than us. And those issues can be just typos. Sometimes we find that. Sometimes the issues are more serious things like a mathematical inaccuracy added by a reviewer or a mistake in a paper that we had missed originally. Okay, so we have a question. Kaylee is asking, at what point do people typically apply to be reviewers? Or at what point we contact them asking them to be reviewers? And yeah, that is a good thing to know. Usually, at least that's my approach, I wait for people to be somewhat established in their career. Some people like to start very early, as soon as they are postdocs, sometimes even when they are finish up finishing up in grad school. But I think probably waiting a little might be good, so that suddenly you don't find that you don't have time to do your work because we're asking you to do reviews for us. I have a policy where I wait for an author to have a certain number of papers already published. Ideally, when people are finishing up their postdoc or in starting a tenure track position, it's a good place to contact me. I find also some people volunteer to be reviewers much later in their career. And some people have been reviewers with us for many years. Others wait until they are emeritus, so they now have time because they don't have to teach. I know people that start very early, and that's great. If that's what you want to do and you're passionate about it, please go for it. But I think that the earlier you join us, the trickier might be at the beginning when you're interested in producing a high output because you need to establish your name with an item or a tenure track job or something like that. If we contact you and you're interested in being a reviewer, but you feel, well, maybe now is not the ideal time, but I would like to do it in 2 years or something like that, that's perfectly fine. Let us know and we'll keep you in mind. If you're a reviewer and you really want to review for us, and at a particular time you find yourself overwhelmed by whatever reason, let us know and we can put you on hold. That's also something very natural, and it happens sometimes. For instance, last year, I think that everybody, very reasonably, was very stressed out with things that were not particularly related to mathematics. And some people needed to take a break. So that's fine. Let us know. We'll put you on break for the time that you suggest. And then when you're ready to come back to us, let us know, and we'll be happy to send you new reviews. I assure you that's not something that we ever are in lack of, need for reviewers or papers to assign. So Ed has been sharing a little survey form. It's a link, it's very fast. We'll appreciate it if you spare us a minute to fill out this survey. Thank you very much. I'll stay here for a few more minutes in case there are more questions.
There's just 10 minutes left, Andres. Did you show people the remote access part?
No, that's something that might be good to know.
I think you could do that in 4 or 5 minutes.
So yeah, so let's do that. So when you're at a university, typically through their library, they are affiliated with us, which means they have access to the database. that sometimes you want to access the database from home as opposed to from your office. In these times, particularly, you might not be going to your office at all. This icon that you see on the right, mark remote access, gives you a way of doing that. If you are in a place where you have access to the database with your laptop and you click on the item, this link appears, which tells you how to get a remote pairing of your computer with the access provided by your university. If you want that pairing to occur, then you just click there. You accept our license agreement. And that's it. You are granted a 90-day access, which means that now your computer is going to have access to the database no matter where you are. At the moment, there is no way for individuals to get a subscription to MathSciNet. So these subscriptions are through universities. And if you are at home and you need access, that's the easiest way. Just be with your laptop at the place where there is access, click on this button, and it's just 2 more clicks. And for 90 days, you can access this thing directly. Right now, while you are in the platform for the JMM, you can do that as well. So that's an easy way to get access to MathSciNet directly here. If you are at home, you're affiliated with the university, and well, due to the pandemic or other reasons, you cannot currently visit your institution with your laptop to do this pairing, then you can email your librarian or the person in the university in charge of, well, maintaining your subscription. And they'll give you a link with instructions so that you can replicate this and have access to us.
And I think people are starting to leave to go to special sessions and stuff. They should certainly feel free to do that. I know that you don't have to walk as far virtually as if we were at a conference center.
Yeah, so I see one more question that maybe Ed might have some information with this. So when you link to MathSciNet from your website or whatever, you are required a login. So I imagine if you have gone through the remote access and you have your computer paired, then you are directly you directly get access to the site. But otherwise, you are asked for some login information. So how do people find that information?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Answer that. So there's a couple ways. One, you can go through your university's library page. And so, for example, we have, being at Math Reviews in Ann Arbor, we have access to the University of Michigan's library page. I would go to the university's library page, search on MathSciNet, And then while logged into the University of Michigan, it would allow me to access MathSciNet. And then at that time, I can still remote pair, so that then for the next 90 days, I don't have to go through the library to gain access. For some institutions, during the pandemic, they've had special logins given to them if people have been having difficulties connecting to their library site. There's a point of contact at your library or in your math department who will have login information that will allow you to log in directly. But I would try first going through your university library.
Thank you.
You have 4 minutes left. Any key information in 4 minutes? Well, one thing I would say is Mike mentioned librarians. If you have issues with MathSciNet or trying to get access to it or how to use it, find the person at your library who's the designated mathematics librarian. Typically, he or she will be mathematics in some other areas, mathematics and physics, statistics, but they very often know an awful lot about MathSciNet, as well as about other resources that you as an early career mathematician could take advantage of. Other databases, but also other ways of accessing material, say, from off campus, especially important during pandemic times. So learn to love your librarian. They can really be your friend as you try to really dig through the corners of published literature, as well as establishing yourself in that. And I keep watching the clock, and I see that our convex tech support is Kate, who is the supreme being in this room, and we'll be shutting us down in about 2 minutes. If you have a question, you can put it in chat with your email, and we can deal with it later.
Yes, I will get out the hook and pull you off stage. People can also visit on the meeting program site. They can visit the session page and post questions there asynchronously. Andreas, I looked for the message that you were sent, and I didn't see it there, but I'll take care of that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.